I love this idea of building smart organizations that's based on co-intelligence. And the co-intelligence to me is on two levels. So co-intelligence originally means bringing out the best capabilities of both people and technology. I think the second level is bringing out the best from both leaders and employees and the whole workforce. So co-intelligence to me would be those two pieces. Only 10% of organizations include their employees in their planning for AI, which is mind-boggling. So yeah, that would be my background, is that I don't think we're asking the right questions and we're definitely not listening. The idea is that you want to make the best decisions you can. I think that's what every leader wants. You want to build a smart organization where people and technology work together. That can only happen if you get the data on what people are thinking, how they feel, and where they want to take action.
This is Solving for Change, the podcast where you'll hear stories from business leaders and technology industry experts about how they executed bold business transformation in response to shifts in the market or advances in technology. In every episode, we'll explore real-world strategies and technologies that fuel successful evolution. I'm your host this month, Mike Reeves. And in today's session, I'm very excited about our guest, and I'll say a longtime friend now that's we've done a lot of work with in Mobia. And today's session, we've titled it "How to Build a Smart Organization," and Mike DeVenney is our guest today. And we've done a lot of work with Mike over the years, and he's done an amazing amount of consulting around culture and business transformation and change. And today we're going to talk about that, and we're going to get very specific into a few areas around how you build a smart organization. And I think it'll be clear what we're exactly trying to define and discuss as we get into the topic today. But what I'd like to do right now is just give Mike a chance to welcome him to the show and do a quick introduction on his background, and lots of depth to talk through today. And I'm super excited about having you on the show. So thanks for joining.
Thanks, Mike, and happy to do it. And I never think there's a quick introduction for me. I've got my own company, Work Insights, which is really focused on data around understanding how people work and how they do the things that they do or don't do. And that comes from background as an investment analyst. So I'm an addict with numbers and love to understand them, and had a consulting company for years looking at leadership and organizational development. So really fascinated again by how people work together and how leadership impacts that, and then moved into kind of putting them all together, that it's making decisions a lot of times is based more on anecdote than actual facts. So I looked at if we could measure and provide data in terms of how people feel, think, and act, then that would really help leaders make the best decisions they can. And now with technology so prevalent, particularly AI, this has all come together in terms of like really understanding how people will respond and knowing that before you make decisions.
Yeah, thanks for that. And we'll definitely dig into those types of themes here today in the session. Excuse me. The one thing I'd like you to do, as we teed up and discuss this session, and going to be a theme like everyone's been talking about, certainly around technology and how you introduce it into an organization. And right now, everyone's talking about AI. So we're going to talk about AI today, and large language models in particular, and generative AI. And, it's a pretty frothy topic these days. And so what I'd like to do is maybe start with, we've called this session today, How to Build a Smart Organization. And maybe take a minute and, if you don't mind, give us a definition of what is a smart organization.
So a smart organization for me is one that's based on co-intelligence, which means we're bringing out the best of people and technology. And there's a lot of challenges in terms of the perception that AI will be a job displacement rather than a role augmentation. And I think the whole idea of the smart organization is engaging employees in the process of implementing new technologies so that you bring out the best of both.
maybe we can also just overlay on that a little bit of background. And I know you do a lot of time researching, the Canadian market, the U.S. market, and globally in terms of, some of the themes around AI and how technology is getting introduced into organizations and how you communicate that and handle change management piece, which I think are themes you just hit on. And if you look at look across Canada right now, we know investment's been a challenge. We know innovation is a challenge, and if you look at the scorecards in terms of how we're doing globally, we certainly wouldn't be at the top of the list in terms of performance. And I wonder if you want to pause there and maybe talk through a couple of anecdotes from some of the research and the insight that you have.
The biggest thing we're facing right now is this productivity gap. And the focus, I think, for a lot of leaders around AI has been, this is the answer to the productivity gap. We have been gradually and steadily declining in our productivity, not only against the U.S., but against other advanced economies. And the question often becomes, like, are we simply not working hard enough, which is not it at all. What it comes down to are two big issues, is that we don't innovate as much as we could. We have one of the lowest rates of applied innovation of any advanced economy. And it doesn't mean we don't have a lot of really smart and innovative and imaginative people. It's just that we don't capitalize on it, which is the second part, is we don't invest in training and development like other countries do. So those two together are a bigger part of why we're not keeping up with the other nations in that advanced economy group. So for me, that's a big piece. And like an anecdote very quickly is that I heard a company this week that, they want to pilot an AI project as quickly as possible. So it's very much what I've seen in other ones, like AI is basically a solution looking for a problem. So the CEO wants to move out quickly, and the whole premise of how this is going to work is based on anecdote. So people have said this is the best place for them to apply it, so that's what they're going to do. And I think, they're going to hit a massive brick wall within the next 3 to 4 weeks as they roll it out. And this is where, for me, like a smart organization, again, is how do we include the employees who know best, I would say, how work is actually done, where there's opportunities to add value for clients or customers. And that's something we don't do very well. Like only 10% of organizations include their employees in their planning for AI, which is mind-boggling. So yeah, that would be my background, is that I don't think we're asking the right questions, and we're definitely not listening.
So let's dig into that a little more. I'd like to talk a little bit more about some of the challenges or the issues that companies are having before we kind of get into the solutioning and kind of your path or recommendation of how you work through some of the challenges. But just a couple of things you hit on there. So everybody comes in with this notion of we want to take AI and they want to just start to run in the organization and look for a business problem to solve. And I think everyone's sometimes you have success with that. Oftentimes, to your point, you don't. The majority of the times you don't. And so there's a set of, it seems to me, a set of standard issues that are evolving or materialized and that you can see that are repeating themselves over time as companies try to look at. And it's not just AI. There's lots of other technology or new fancy widgets that have come out over the years that everyone's trying to take into a company to try and create some sort of benefit or value. And so if you look at what some of the heavier issues are today, it's certainly like the planning and the strategy, and then you get to the communication piece. So I wonder if we could just talk about those two pillars for a couple of minutes.
Yeah, so there's a number of big, I think, hurdles that organizations, I wouldn't say face, but has put themselves into. So the first one is that only 8% of organizations, I'm a data nut, so there's going to be a lot of stats. So only 8% of organizations actually have a strategy for AI. So that does not bode well for what's going to happen. I personally think AI is the electricity of our generation. It is going to change the way we live and how we work. And I think in very positive ways. So like I am definitely a supporter and proponent of AI. I just think we need to have a thought first about how we're actually going to use it. So that lack of strategy creates a lot of uncertainty for employees, which then puts up this wall of resistance, which doesn't have to be there. But the fact is, there's a second hurdle that, as I mentioned before, only 10% of companies will actually involve and include employees in the development of AI solutions. So one, there's no strategy, and two, we haven't actually included employees in looking at where AI could help them. So you're really stiffening the resolve against trying things with people. And I think that's probably the two biggest things, which leads to the third issue, which is we never get better at change. It seems like John Cotter was in the 1990s speaking about, how we can really improve the way we move change forward. Supposedly we listened, but we haven't listened well because right now the stat is only 12% of particularly digital and AI transformations. Only 12% will actually create successful results. We're failing less, so that's what we took from Cotter and his other change leaders, is that we have fewer initiatives failing, but the bulk of them just sit there and wallow. So we've got better at not failing, but we've got worse at actually succeeding. So that's kind of a different way of looking at it. So I think the biggest challenge we face is that the answers that we're looking for are right in front of us, and we don't ask for them, which is employees hold the most, to me, employees hold the most opportunity for organizations to move forward, but we don't take advantage of it. We get excited when we hear about these collabs with universities and organizations and, the brilliance of students and like how great this is. And I am not knocking that for a minute because that's where a lot of innovation happens. But we also could do collabs with our own employees. They're the ones that are inside of what you are trying to do as an organization. They have the most understanding of clients and customers of anybody within the organization, particularly at the executive level. And they see the work day to day. But yet, why can't we do a collab, if we want to call it that, with employees and bring them into the equation? I think leaders get concerned about, well, this will just slow us down. Actually, it's going to speed you up. It doesn't take long to ask and hear the answers. But by not asking, you're going to get mired down in problems within 2 to 3 months of starting whatever initiative you're looking at. And that's why change initiatives don't achieve the results we're hoping for. So that would be a couple of big pieces for me. Another one that came out from Conference Board of Canada, a report showing that 63% of employees do not trust the executive innovation initiatives. So that's not good. So when you're trying to move quickly and move something like AI, which everyone's had that moment in the last year where Chat or DALL-E or whatever has just wowed you, and this is like going to change our lives. So we want to use it, but we're not going forward in a way that's going to make a real lasting difference. And that, to me, I think we've added to the productivity gap a perception gap.
And do you have maybe a couple of notions in terms of, like, a lot of companies would I'm sure this resonates in terms of what you just described, but if you look at the strategy piece, you build the strategy piece, you look at the communication piece, and you look at the change piece, and all this wraps around culture in some capacity. But are there a lot of commonalities that you see when you start to link those three things together in terms of common sets of issues? And then what I'd like to move into, maybe after, like, you talk through a fair bit of that, but I wonder if you could, is there kind of a linear approach that you could take to linking those three things together? And then maybe we can work our way into, how you can prescribe some options for folks to, try and build something in terms of a plan to move forward with.
I think the biggest thing is like this disconnection. And the way we do things now creates and solidifies this disconnection. And in work I've done over the last year around quality of work in organizations, what really kind of blew my mind was that 45% of employees don't trust the decisions being made by executives and don't feel that their voices are being heard. This is not a new problem. So this has been going on for a long time. But I think our leadership approach has kind of evolved to sell and tell. So we've got something we want to do. We've developed a strategy at the executive level. We've had a number of offsites. We put this all together. It's been based on what a consultant might tell you. And no offense to consultants since I am one, but this strategy is then rolled out and then it just hits a brick wall. And again, it's because the decisions made within that strategy have not included the voices of employees, and therefore it doesn't resonate. And that's the big problem. And another piece that comes out of listening to employees is, again, this rush to move AI forward. We're looking at two issues that I think are going to really boggle people up, which is we're all talking about skill development. Well, we actually should ask people what skills they have and what they need to develop. What is phenomenal to me is that it's around 56% of employers say that they're going to reskill and upskill employees internally for AI, but yet they don't actually know what skills they're going to be trying to develop. That would be good to know. So things like this create a lot of uncertainty for employees. And with the, leftover hangover from COVID and the uncertainty we have in the world, work is something we look to for, not just purpose and meaning, but also for some consistency in our life. So when that doesn't make sense to us anymore, that's what's really fueling the big turnover issues that we're having. It's not, I know everyone wants to point to pay, but it's not. It's pointing to this lack of certainty as to what my future is in the company. No one's listening to me. Decisions don't make sense. So maybe I should go somewhere where it'll make more sense. So I might have meandered there a bit, but I do.
No, that was great, and I think lot in there. I mean, we're talking about communication, culture, comfort, and making sure people understand how they fit into an organization, and not just today, but the longer term, especially when you're looking at what people would view as disruptive change potentially, and so much more about the disruption rather than the change and the positive side of what potentially can be the result, and the communication is, and the planning around that communication, and how often you communicate is certainly very key. And what I'd like to kind of dig into now is, and this goes as I mentioned at the front end of our podcast, like you've done a lot of wonderful things with us, and I know you've got this set of assessments and diagnostics that you can come in and really help a company gain some rich insights and across a number of dimensions of an organization. And lately it's as we've been talking about, and everyone's talking about, it's around AI and generative AI, and what that approach is. And I know you've been doing a lot of research, and you've got a set of diagnostics now that you've brought to market to be able to help companies with the topics that we're talking about here. So let's maybe move into shifting into talking about, okay, what can we do? What is the approach? So, you can come in, you can help with a diagnostic or an assessment, and maybe talk about that a little bit in terms of what you'll come in and do. And then, how do we start to overlay that into or transfer that into a plan in terms of a playbook that you can potentially start to build, and organizations can start to implement to help them address some of the issues that we're touching on here.
I think there's like a few big questions that leaders need to look at. One is, how do we involve people in the development of AI solutions? what are the fears and concerns that employees actually have? And then, are we doing the right things to support this idea of a smart organization where people and technology work together? The way to get there, in my mind, is start with the problem. So understanding what the problem is that you're looking to resolve. So that could be operational efficiency. It could be creating new revenues. It could be enhancing customer experience. It could be all three of those. And the second piece then would be going with an analytic to the employee base. So I customize and develop analytics that really look to resolve the specific problem that you're facing, or maybe it's an opportunity you want to capture, and getting the perspectives of employees on that. And I use AI in what I do. So it's looking at both quantitative and, more importantly, sentiment. So the sentiment analysis can be absolutely stunning because it tells you very clearly how people feel and what they think, and what are the types of communications that will resonate most with them. I've heard so many leaders say, well, we have forums, we have open discussions, and my response is, that's really good, but that's for giving out information, not for getting. People typically will not say what they think in that type of situation. And I had one CEO who said, I've spent the last month talking to pretty much every employee in the company. And I said, that was really good, but my guess is you didn't really get what you were looking for. He had all kinds of little file cards with what each person said and didn't know what to do with them. AI could have helped with that. But anyway, you really have to ask employees directly and give them an opportunity to respond anonymously. To me, the ability to say what you think without being identified, without being have some reaction to, is critical. So we get that information, and as you've seen it, it's extensive. And then the whole point is we take that based on the original problem or opportunity. We look at the key insights. There are always surprises, which is what I love about what I do, because I'll go into it thinking, this will probably come out. And then, wow, didn't see that. So just finished a large project for a sector that wants to implement AI. And what came out was completely not expected. Was a concern for discrimination against people in underrepresented groups. That AI would be reserved and skills would be provided only for those in other groups. So that's something the organization took very seriously, is now developing a whole initiative around the fairness of opportunity, which I thought was just a fantastic outcome from it. But they wouldn't have known that if they hadn't have asked. So everything I do is based around, how do you make the best decisions possible? You do that with data that gives you a really objective look at what's happening. And from both, like I said, the quantitative, how people score certain things, to the qualitative in terms of the sentiment analysis, but also giving people a chance to say where they think opportunities exist and what things cause them the most friction in terms of getting what they want done. That's where you've got some real interesting use cases that people will support. And from there, it's helping people implement. So that might be more long-winded as always, but the idea is that you want to make the best decisions you can. I think that's what every leader wants. You want to build a smart organization where people and technology work together. That can only happen if you get the data on what people are thinking, how they feel, and where they want to take action.
I can say we've experienced that firsthand with working with you, and this wasn't meant to be about your consulting and your service, but I can certainly speak firsthand to the richness that we've experienced as a result. Because I find when you're trying to build strategies, oftentimes leadership teams will build strategies in a vacuum, and to your point, you really need that collaboration and that bottom up build in terms of what you're what folks in the organization are feeling, and whether or not you've included and they feel inclusive in that process around trying to build a plan for a year, for a fiscal year as an example. And I think it's really super important, what you just described, that more leaders take the time and pause and really think about that grassroots or ground up build of a plan in terms of anything that you're trying to do, but specifically these days, again, back to the AI and Gen AI initiatives that companies are trying to bring into their organization, because there is so much value and richness there that can be established and gained if the approach is done right. And unfortunately, what happens is a lot of companies don't do that right, so they set themselves back, and or they say, "Oh, we tried this, and we're not going to pursue that anymore this year or into the foreseeable future." So, lots to work on there for every company for sure. And I'd like to spend maybe a couple more minutes now. We kind of talked through the problems. We've talked a bit about kind of approach and how you can try and look at the transformation initiatives and bringing AI as an example into an organization and be successful with it. How would you measure success? Let's talk a little bit about that. So, you've got a project, you got people, you did all the goodness that we just talked about, and then now you're looking at outcome. And it's easy to establish, I'll say, some hardline operational KPIs, but there's a lot of other things you want to consider as well. And now it's back to the people piece in terms of what I would consider like the super important piece. Like, you got to make it sticky there. So have people excited, get people comfortable, make sure you get over all those front end encumbrances around job security and or some wage degradation. In some cases, some people seem to think that AI is going to take a portion of their income away from them once it takes over their job per se. So maybe talk a little bit about what success looks like.
Success, without a doubt, is about changing behavior. You've succeeded if people actually change their behaviors. So on one side, they change their behavior in terms of using and embracing AI, rather than being fearful of it. So that's where you can put in some rather bottom line metrics. And as you know, I'm a chartered financial analyst, came from the investment business. So return on investment is really essential for me. So there's also the aspect of, how do we measure if we've done a good job in terms of bringing people in? So the great thing about data is that when we do the first diagnostic, you've now got a baseline. So if we choose, say, 3 areas that are really important, and you mentioned communication. So we could set up a pulse survey that would be just a few questions around that. So you wouldn't have to wait a year to retest and see where people are. You could assess each month maybe a list of 10 questions about how we're doing here. And if you originally scored, let's say, which is the typical score, around 62 or 63 on voices being heard, if that goes up to 70, you've succeeded. So you're going to see shifts in the way people perceive their working experience. And everything in my mind is measurable. So you just decide what it is you want to see, what behaviors that you want to see shifted, and then we simply measure it. And the only way to measure it is to keep asking people. And people don't get fatigued by, I hear a lot of times about survey fatigue. That's when you don't do anything with the results. So the whole point is that if you actually do something and people see it, they will not mind doing another survey. In fact, they'll get more engaged in it. And I wanted to mention again, or mention just from an earlier comment, a lot of times I'll hear leaders say, but this is going to take us time. Like we're in a rush, we've got to get this out. And I've heard that so many times. I'm thinking, you're going to spend a lot more time fixing what happens by not asking. And as you know, this doesn't take a lot of time. My thought is always, takes me a few weeks, and it's got to save you a few years of trying to deal with the fallout. So it is being really clear up front on the behaviors that you want to see shift. So there can be the bottom line impact of the usage of AI and how that helps productivity, how it helps revenue generation, profitability, all those things. So we can measure that. But there's also the behaviors you want to see, that people feel like they're being heard, that people feel like they have greater confidence in decisions, and people feel like they believe the innovations are working. Again, we can measure that and track it. And you can see it like over in real time that these changes are happening. So, and you'll feel it. Like that's another thing. You start feeling it in the organization. There's a different energy because people are seeing that you've heard them. And that's just going to make a landslide difference.
And it's interesting, some things that you just touched on there that I think are super important is, you can quantify and you can actually create data around a lot of these soft issues or soft areas that previously you would just, try and guess at or try and some sort of sentiment analysis, but, not with any concrete information. And what I really like about what you just talked about is that you can actually go in and quantify this stuff, and you can measure a lot of these soft things that are so important to understanding how you can be successful, and if you're being successful, and things you can keep doing or things you need to continue to augment or change as you're trying to going through this iterative cycle of improvement. I don't know if you have any more anecdotes you want to share about that, but I really like those features because it really back to the richness of the depth in terms of the employee engagement and feeling like they're being heard, and that they are affecting change, and they are being super important to the company and its purpose and its direction. You've really got a way to be able to measure those things, which is really cool.
Great example is like this one I've just been working on, where if I had gone in as a consultant the way I used to work and, talking to people, and then I came back to the leadership and said, there's a perceived discrimination against opportunity here. It's really easy for leaders to say, well, that's what you say. Like, I don't see that. But when we do the analytic and come back with 35.9% of employees feel discriminated against for opportunity. Okay, now we have to pay attention to that. Plus, we can correlate that to the actual things that are happening. And even more, we can correlate it to it's responsible for this much of turnover. So now, like, we're back into a constructive conversation, not based on anecdote. And like you said, I can then also add the sentiment to it that they have a 22% greater likelihood of having a negative opinion of the company than others. Okay, so not only do they feel discriminated against, but they're probably talking to others negatively about the organization. So we've gone from a challenge we might be having to now we've got real objective data on what's happening and why, and most importantly, how we can resolve it. So this organization, the CEO is excellent, and she is on it. So this is something they're working on, and they're going to measure and change. So there's something where behavioral change will be people feel there's a fair opportunity for learning and developing new skills. That's something, again, we can measure. And my suspicion is that we'll see a lower turnover risk. So in those things, again, sorry, I love data, but the whole idea of data is that whatever it is you're trying to change, and particularly with AI, because it's still kind of a mystery for everybody, well, it's a mystery for everyone, I guess, is that the more we can gain objective data from people who are actually going to use it, the greater the likelihood that we'll be able to successfully build that smarter organization.
Really good insights there, and appreciate you sharing all that. And I know you got a lot of experience and richness around this. So, data is super important, but you also bring the other pieces to bear, which is, how do you communicate that and massage that back into the organization and not just do, a data dump. And so it's super important that you overlay those two things together, because they have to be happening together to be successful. Once you're in and you're trying to actually affect these changes and make these changes. And so that, from here, what I'd like to shift into is maybe talk about, we've talked from the start to, the problems, the issues, and then through to some solutioning and some scenarios. And, maybe just let's spend 2 minutes talking about, what's next. So company, they go through this process and come in. If you've helped them, they've had, some baseline of success and a baseline to build from. Where do you go from there? So maybe it's a use case or two, maybe it's a department and some people change and stuff like that in terms of getting more comfortable. Like, how do you continue to put scale around this thing and continue to keep the momentum moving?
So first thing you'd have back is, so you've gone through the data, you understand the landscape of where people are. You've had some real use cases that have been developed from the input of this, collab with employees, if you want to call it that. There's going to be communication, and it's always, as you mentioned, it's always around communication. So we're communicating. Big thing I do is help prioritize, like what are the initiatives or what are the areas that will have the biggest impact for you. So if we're talking about AI, so what AI use case can we move forward that will have the biggest impact? There was a great case of a large bakery in the US that they were intent upon implementing AI. So they created this AI system for, it was several $100,000 that would assess, that would regularly check and order materials. And then they found out later that it only takes about an hour a week for the bakery staff to check on the level of materials and make the order. So what they did is they spent, let's say, $280,000 to solve a $14,000 problem. So if they had asked, that would have been something that would have been kind of put to the side. Yeah, that's not worth it. So biggest thing is, like, how do you prioritize based on impact, cost, and value created, and then help to move it through. So steps are really understanding the challenges that you want to dive into. So let's say it's finding a way to be more productive. And then we customize the analytic to your organization. We get the data, we bring back, show the insights around your specific issue, plus bring out things that came up in the data. Then we look at the insights in terms of how do you want to apply that. Then we look at how do you communicate, because the great thing about the data is that people tell you exactly how they want to be communicated to, which is great. So that part's amazing. And then we help you roll that out. And like you said, how to measure success. Once you get that first use case outgoing, people engaged, fully using it. Big part of what I'm trying to do as well is help with user interface. It's a little off, but what I've found is that seems to be one of the biggest sticking points with moving AI, but other technologies out. If you make it difficult to use, people won't use it. So asking some questions around that, specific use case will really help you in terms of ease of use for people. But once you get that first one out, then you can move it forward. So if you've got a large healthcare company, construction company, there is no industry that's not going to be impacted by AI. The first thing would be, putting together that analytic to understand the context of the way people see their work, and from there developing where you can move AI use cases out, and then measuring the impact and building on it from there.
That kind of takes us to we'll just spend a couple of minutes here maybe talking about, and we'll wind down our session today. And it's been awesome. So I appreciate your time as always. If we talk about some of the key themes for today, it's, you need to, sit down and figure out what are your objectives, like what are you trying to do or what do you want to do? And then you want to try and build a strategy around that. And, the other important elements are communication, change management, but also the inclusion of folks across the organization. Like I think that's been certainly underscored by you today, and it's how important, and a lot of the power comes from, that grassroots or ground up approach in terms of what you want to try and accomplish or do. And I don't think you can over communicate on any of that enough. And it's, there's a lot of richness in here. There's more to the discussion today. I think we just kind of, we framed it up and hit a lot of the high level key elements of it. But is there anything else you kind of like to add into what we're describing here? Or?
I'll go back to the fact, like, I use AI constantly. I absolutely love it. It has changed, the way I do work positively and dramatically. So I see the opportunity, but I do have this fear of how we are going to move it out and it's going to fall flat. So I love this idea of building smart organizations that's based on co-intelligence. And the co-intelligence to me is on two levels. So co-intelligence originally means bringing out the best capabilities of both people and technology. I think the second level is bringing out the best from both leaders and employees and the whole workforce. So co-intelligence to me would be those two pieces. And if an organization can move forward that way and not fall to the pressure of trying to get something out quickly, doing what I do only takes about a month. So it's not going to stall you too long. In fact, it's going to help you speed things up quite quickly. So I think that first action for any leader to take is find out how people actually do feel and think about AI or about their overall quality of work and where they see the challenges and opportunities and how work is done. And that is going to set the company up to really be successful.
That's great. No, I appreciate that. And we'll get ready to close off here. But in terms of people that are going to watch this podcast, let's tell them how to get in touch with you. I can tell you they can certainly come to Mobia and get in touch. We can help with that. But I know you have your own stuff that you hang out there, so I'll give you a minute to maybe share that.
Yeah. So the easiest place to find me is send me an email. That's the easiest way, and it's michael@workinsights.io. And we can provide that somewhere probably on the podcast. But questions are easy. Send me a question about what you're doing. And as you can tell, I'm always happy to have a chat. So like if there's a question from the podcast that people want to investigate, just drop me an email. We can have a chat about it. There's no charge for having a conversation and then see where it can go from there. But I think the biggest thing is to know that there's ways to make these decisions far more objective for you. I think a lot of leaders there's just so much going on at once right now. And we've got definite cost issues coming in place because the economy is pretty uncertain right now and will be for a little while. So any way that I can help on that side, make things more certain, make things more objective, yeah, that's what I like doing.
Great. No, thanks for that. And as I said before, like you've become a friend of mine over the last number of years, and it's been through the work and the things that you've done with us that I've started to get to know you, and it's just been a pleasure, and you've certainly provided a lot of richness for us at Mobia. So I do very much appreciate that, and I was very excited to get you on the podcast today. So I do appreciate you taking the time. I know you got to run to another appointment, but thanks so much for coming on the podcast today. It's been a wonderful discussion, and I'm sure we'll have you back on again.
No, I appreciate it. And I have to say, too, that Mobia is without a doubt my favorite clients to work with. So the feel is returned.
Thank you for listening to Solving for Change. If you enjoyed this episode, leave us a rating and review on your favorite podcast service. Join us for our next episode. It'll be coming out the next few weeks. Thanks very much.